Recording. Good. So, hey everyone, I'm Dean Foley, and welcome to this recording workshop around stories of strength session around cultural safety launch yarn. So, I'll begin by just acknowledging traditional owners throughout the lands and pay my respects to elders past and present, and all Torres Strait Islander Aboriginal people who are joining and everybody in the community who's working to continue to bring healing, safety, prevention, and support around domestic violence. So today I'm joined by Sammy Cooper from Marla Consulting. Sammy brings important cultural safety, community, and practice knowledge to this yarn, and I'm grateful to have her guiding this conversation, which we've finally been able to put together for today. Good old technology. But before we begin, this is a community education prevention awareness session workshop. So it is not like counselling or legal advice or crisis support. And we're not asking anybody to share personal details in the comment sections and that kind of stuff. Like it's all private community information. Sammy. Just thank everybody for joining and everybody who's working hard in community to try to prevent and heal and solve the domestic violence problem we do have. So Sammy's going to talk about cultural safety, community yarn like this, especially around domestic violence prevention and support. So I'll hand it over to you. I'll stop blabbering on and hand it over to you, Sammy.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining. Before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners. I'm a very proud Gumbaynggirr woman from the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and I would also like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal peoples down in Canberra as the traditional ongoing owners, custodians and caretakers of the lands which I live, work and play and raise my own little family now. I pay my deepest respects to elders, past and present, and acknowledge all of the emerging leaders coming up. I'd like to honour my people back home in Coffs Harbour, that region, such a beautiful part of the world, particularly the matriarchs who have held our communities together. These women are the drivers of language revival and culture protection and the establishment of the first immersive school back home, where they are using both languages. So I extend that appreciation to them and to the knowledge and expertise of the women who have been such huge drivers of all of my knowledge in my life, and in particular in this area. We know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are so overrepresented in this field, and we acknowledge the struggles and also the strengths of our peoples and declare that sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be, and it's our job to start protecting and honouring our family systems in a way that honours culture and the strengths that we've already got. So Dean, if you just want to flick back over to presentation, I don't know if you can do that from your end so that we can get the slides up. That would be awesome. We'll get going. So what are we covering today? This yarn's not about defining cultural safety or explaining why it matters. It's about moving the conversation forward into how we as a community can be better, can show up better and can support mob better. It's about community strengths, modelling and good systems. This is not a conversation that we have often when we try and talk about domestic and family violence. There's a lot of work around how we can support one-on-one or support crisis, and I know that we've got lots of really amazing presenters who will talk to that stuff. I just wanted to have a different side of the conversation. We know what domestic, family and sexual violence is. We know what cultural safety is. So the focus now is what's next. Why are we here? There's a lot of talking community around wanting to help. We have such a beautiful network of people who genuinely want to support people who are experiencing domestic, family and sexual violence. And a lot of the times we want to help, but we don't always know what to say or how to help. And sometimes we're worried we'll say the wrong thing. Sometimes we think it's not our place. Sometimes we don't know where to send someone for support. And what we don't talk about enough is that one safe conversation can actually make a huge difference. And a safe yarn can help someone feel less isolated, let them know that they're heard and believed, and take away some of the shame. It can really connect people to support before things spiral further. And as organizations, as people working in community, it's important for us to remember no one is coming to us or calling us because they've had a good day. We often meet people in their hardest days. So that's our initial kind of starting point. If you want to flick over to the next slide, Dean. So where do we start? We're going to talk today a little bit about systems and about layering. So we rise and fall to the level of our systems. We really need good systems to support people. And I think we often start from the wrong question when we start to think through how we create spaces where people feel safe to disclose. I think we often need to come back a step. Maybe instead of asking how we create safe spaces for people to talk, we actually need to ask, how do we create somewhere safe for people to come and be as they are, whether they want to talk or not? So the question on the left here is, how do we create somewhere safe? And I completely acknowledge that it is incredibly important for people to have somewhere safe to go, somewhere safe to land. I just think we also need to think through, in terms of our systems and in terms of layering, I'll go through that a little bit later. How do we create environments where people can go and get help, whether they want to talk or not? We also need to lean into community strengths and healing. So when we talk about prevention and healing, we need to remember that our communities already hold the strengths and most of the answers that we're looking for. We have strong cultures, we have elders and leaders, we have family and kinship systems, we have community-controlled organizations, we have knowledge that's been passed down through generations, and healing doesn't happen in isolation. It actually happens through connection. And as somebody with lived experience of domestic and family violence, as well as experience working in this space for a long time and working with organizations to work through culturally safe responses, connection to culture and community and country is actually the key here. So connection to safe and trusted supports and environments needs to start from a culturally safe place, but it also needs to start from our systems. So we jump through the next slide. I think it's important as well that we also acknowledge that how important trust is. So how many times have you seen this in community? I'm sure everybody's done it. Someone comes to you in community with a problem, with a completely unrelated issue, and it might be something like, my phone's not working, or can you help me get onto Medicare? And as soon as you've built that trust and followed through and done what you said you're going to do, all of a sudden you having a completely different yarn. We have it a lot with aunties in community when we go out and we start to have conversations around domestic and family violence. Often there's a shame barrier here or a trust barrier that means that people are not ready to tell you what they actually need help with. They need to know that they can trust you. So this is about holistic systems and holistic responses. Let's jump over to the next slide. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So what we're fighting here is a lack of knowledge. There's some shame, there's some guilt, there's some fear of systems here. And what we need is trust, respect, strengths-based work, and healing. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, trust exists side by side with cultural safety. That makes sense. We know that. But what it means in practice is that in every conversation we have, we're recognizing that there are impacts of colonization, intergenerational trauma, and systemic barriers here. But we also need to recognize strengths, resilience, culture, and connection here that exist side by side. Both things happen at the same time. And people are more likely to seek support when we know that is embedded in every conversation, that cultural safety is forefront, and then it's not a deficit narrative here that we're focusing on. They're more likely to ask questions, more likely to access services, more likely to trust that they'll be treated with dignity and with respect when our initial conversations are rooted in cultural safety. And it's not just the responsibility of services, it's something that all of us can contribute to, because help seeking looks different for everyone. Not everybody is going to want to come and disclose what's happening for them. And that is completely okay. People deserve help regardless of whether they want to disclose their experiences or not. And the service system roundabout, we know that people have sometimes reached out to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different services trying to get help before they come to us and before they land on our door. And we don't want to be re-triggering people by expecting that they will continue to tell their stories over and over again. That's just re-traumatizing people completely unnecessarily. So if we have good systems and we have organizations who are working in culturally safe ways and layering that contact with community, which I'll go through in a minute, it makes it much more accessible for people to genuinely get help at a time when they need it most. So some people might be more comfortable talking to a health worker or community organizations or a counsellor or support service. It's not always going to be that somebody calls the police as a first response to try and get help. So we just need to remember that wherever they are reaching out and wherever they are reaching us from is where we need to meet them. We need to really meet people where they're at. Sometimes the hardest step for people, but also for organizations, is knowing where to start. So one of the most important things we can do as community members is to normalize help seeking and help fight these things on the left. Let's help fight the lack of knowledge. Let's empower communities with more knowledge around not just what domestic and family and sexual violence is and what it can look like, but also what responses can look like. Let's embed trust and respect and strengths-based practice and remind ourselves and anybody who needs help that reaching out is actually a sign of strength and courage and self-determination. It takes an incredible amount of courage for somebody to come forward to say, I actually need help. We can help create environments where asking for help is seen as something positive and somewhere that it's encouraged rather than somewhere that makes people feel like they are being judged or that brings any kind of layer of shame. So we need to break all of those things down first. Let's jump to the next slide. It'll make a little bit of sense. So this slide is really talking about prevention. Sorry, the slides have come up a little bit funny, but I'll be able to talk through it, so don't worry. So language really matters when we're working with mob and when we're working with communities. We need to remember that there are strong families, strong cultures. We have all of these strengths that are embedded into our cultures: healing and well-being, connection to country, community leadership. Prevention is obviously about responding to all sorts of violence, but it's also about strengthening the things that keep people safe in the first place. And I'm going to keep going back to systems because it really matters. This makes such a huge difference. Systems and layering. We know supports and systems that keep people safe can quickly become barriers when cultural safety is not embedded, and language can really contribute to somebody feeling like they are not in a culturally safe space. When we start to use deficit narratives, when we start to make negative assumptions, when we start to not check our biases for somebody who is help seeking, and when we start to put unrealistic expectations on people who are seeking help, we very quickly erode cultural safety. And from that moment, there is an initial barrier that we haven't even stepped over yet before we can really start to link people in with support services. So let's use strengths-based language. Let's be honest and upfront. Let's be clear with people when they do reach out for help, exactly what they can expect from us, exactly what we can do. And let's be honest about the things that we cannot do. Clear is kind. We are strong, our women are strong, our children are strong, and our culture is centered on strengths. We've been here for 30,000 plus years. We know that we can support people, but we need to do it in the right way. We really need to embed the right language so that in that initial conversation, when we do have somebody reach out to us, that we are not closing the door on them completely unintentionally from the beginning. Let's move to the next slide. I'm going to talk through a little bit about what the principles of cultural safety and culturally safe ways are. So too often our discussions focus solely on deficits, on risk, and on harm. And they are true, they are real, and they are a part of the story, but they cannot be the only story that we tell. Culture is a protective factor. Connection is a protective factor. Our identity is a protective factor. Our community is a protective factor. So let's talk about some safe ways that we can have these conversations. Let's focus on talking to people, to community, to people reaching out about healthy relationships. This helps people recognize whether or not their experiences match up without constantly pushing a narrative of what violence is on people that can make people retract. I know from my lived experience that I initially ended up disclosing to a health worker in a completely unrelated conversation because all of a sudden this health worker was talking to me about what a healthy relationship looked like. And it was an initial way for me, an initial layer, and we will get on to layering in the next couple of slides, an initial point of contact for me that made me go, actually, mine doesn't look like that. That's not how I'm feeling. I'm not feeling safe. I'm not feeling loved. I'm not feeling valued and nurtured. So an initial conversation that focuses on healthy relationships can sometimes be a really gentle way of opening up what help might look like for people. Back to the slides, we can talk about community challenges. In a third person kind of sense, it helps people to comment on patterns of behavior instead of their stories. So lots of organizations run incredible initiatives like yarning circles and that kind of thing. They can sometimes focus too much, though, on have you seen these things? Have you experienced these things? Instead of having a really broad conversation. Let's talk about community challenges. Let's talk about what have we seen in community? What do we know are challenges in our communities that talk about patterns of behavior instead of asking people to talk about their individual experiences or about their family members or about their friends and loved ones who are going through these things. Let's avoid labels. Let's use plain language. Describe behaviors that you want to have a conversation about in plain language. There's a lot of rhetoric around using language from legislation so that people are really clear on where their next steps might land. And I think that that's a really valuable part of these ways of moving forwards. But when we start to use words and language like coercive control and financial abuse, often it creates a barrier for people to be able to talk earnestly and in a really genuine way about their experience. So we can use language if we are having conversations with people about violence that they're experiencing or that they've seen, that helps remove some of the fear around not knowing how to explain their experience or not knowing exactly what language to use. Just let people be as they are, particularly if they are going through experiences where they're not feeling like they're clear in the mind about what they want to do or about what they're experiencing, about what next steps are. If somebody is experiencing violence, they're not having a good day. And I mean that in a really nice way. Obviously, domestic and family and sexual violence is a really horrendous physical experience, but often psychologically, it can really make people feel really muddled. And when we start to use labels, it can be a barrier. So let's use clear language. Let's use hit. Let's use shout it out. Let's use stop you from seeing family or taking money. Take this language away from isolation and move it into a conversation that everybody can have at the same time so that we're not having two separate conversations in a parallel way. And we can use well-known campaigns. If you're doing work in community, let's jump off campaigns, and there's a list here that you can have a bit of a look at and use some of their similar language. They've got ambassadors who are already on board. Lots of these organizations and campaigns have got really well-established pamphlets and information and ideas. Turn Up Respect, You Right Sis is incredible. They've got some really good video series. It Ain't Weak to Speak, No More, Our Ways, Strong Ways is a really recent one that hopefully gets off the ground, and Violence Is Not Our Way. So there's lots of well-known campaigns that you can either use in your organizations or that you can go to for ideas. You don't need to kind of continue to recreate the wheel if we're talking about what community knowledge might look like or talking about sharing education in community. So I'll jump to the next slide. And this one's a little bit hard to see, sorry, because the boxes didn't come across, but hopefully you can see that okay, and I'll talk it through. So the word that I've been using a lot is layering at the start and all through our presentation. And here's what I mean. So layering is something I think politicians use all of the time, right? In their contact with us. They're everywhere. They're in our schools. They're handing out awards. They're standing out the front of IGA. They're on our fridges, on magnets. They're absolutely everywhere. They're doing mailbox drops. So at any point of the day, you can see a politician's face or their name 2 or 3 times kind of without even knowing. And I think that's a really key thing that we can use when we talk about how to do domestic and family violence prevention work, because it's not confronting, it's just constant. So the last place, obviously, people want to talk is out the front of IGA when they're, waving flyers in your face and asking you what you want done in your community. But this is about constant messaging, and especially with mob. So people need to trust you before they will open up about what's going on. But we can embed ways of meeting services in the community, of layering people and letting people experience your service in community before somebody really needs you. So you can send workers to attend markets and sporting events and community barbecues and school events. This is not about referrals or about assessments or about having really deep conversations with people about their experiences of violence. This is just about relationship building. That is absolutely the key. Relationships are the work. So the most effective long-term initiatives often focus on respectful relationships, culture, positive role modeling, community accountability, healthy communication, and challenging harmful attitudes. But we can do that with small acts every day as organizations. So you can run a footy or a netball or a gala day, or jump on the back of one and run a No to DV campaign. The Queensland Indigenous Family Violence Legal Service run one. They just run a big No to DV campaign. So they're a good idea to jump on if you haven't seen what they've been doing. There's warm referrals between services. Obviously, that's a really key part of people experiencing the service system, which can be a bit of a roundabout. People feel like they're just getting sent from one place to the other, call after call after call, not getting anywhere. We need culturally safe services. An idea for, jump onto the slides for me, Dean, an idea for this idea of layering is signs on the toilet doors in shops, because that's a safe place where everybody can go. Everybody goes to do the groceries. Everybody goes to do whatever it might be, in your community. Some have, big Westfields, and other people just have a local IGA. But having signs or information or places where people can access you or call, or QR codes on the doors in places where they won't be flagged if they're being tracked, or if they're feeling a bit of shame, or if they're not sure that they want people to know what's happening, particularly in smaller communities. It's a really effective way of making this accessible and making help accessible. You can run information nights for teens and parents. I was part of an initiative that ran information sessions and got in touch with all of the local high schools and put on, some afternoon tea or some dinner, or, just snacks or whatever it might be, and had a panel of people talking there was one from police, one from a lived experience perspective, some from different organisations in the communities, about domestic and family violence and prevention in young people. And they ran a women's session for young girls and their parents, and also a men's session for young boys and their parents, to talk about what healthy relationships really look like. Beyond DV do some really good work there in southeast Queensland, and just expanding up north along the Queensland coast as well. And they also have these initiatives called Hope Hubs, which are in big Westfields, so that, again, people can come to a Westfield, access safety. They're usually located as separate rooms with safe doors right next to the bathrooms, so they're easy to access, right? This is about layering again. You can have yarning circles and weaving without a focus on domestic and family violence. You can just open up a space where people can come and have trusted faces from community, from domestic and family violence services, from support services, who are in those weaving circles, so that somebody might have an opportunity to come up to you afterwards, to start to build a relationship, or to maybe be brave enough to ask a question. But this is about creating opportunities for people to see you and to experience the service in community without having to walk through the doors. That's often such a massive barrier that we don't think about. We need trusted faces at events. You can run breakfast clubs at schools. There's some really great initiatives happening at Southwest New South Wales, going kind of around the country here, who run breakfast clubs at schools where parents can either drop them off, or they've got a bus that goes around and picks kids up, so that there's, again, another trusted face and another way that people can talk about what's happening, or actually they can just come to school and be safe and be fed. And the other really effective way of being able to have contact happening is to have merch with safe numbers on it. There's lots of little booklets that people can put in their wallets. Some people have got magnets or notepads with some down the bottom, with contacts down the bottom. So there's lots of really effective ways that you can layer contact in community without actually asking people to come and disclose what's happening to them. And it's really important that we focus on this relationship work, particularly with mob. if we jump onto the next slide, let me move that across. So these are just some other ideas, and I hope people take these. I don't know what's happened to that image down the bottom, but I hope you can take some of this stuff if you're not already doing it and really start to embed it. So QR codes that people can scan in the back of community halls, or again, on the back of toilet doors is a good one. But anywhere that you think people might be able to access without it being obvious that somebody is trying to access help for domestic and family violence. QR codes are great. People can scan them on their phone. It's not obvious initially exactly what it is. And have them in places where people can stand there and try and scan them without it being really obvious that someone is trying to take a picture of it. So think through where else that might land. Trusted local champions is a really good one. They do an incredible job of that up in the Torres Strait, heading back up the other way of the country. They've got an incredible program where they've got trusted local champions who work with all of the services as kind of like a community translator, I suppose. They do an absolutely amazing job. You can do some research on that stuff. The Southwest Queensland run Coffee with a Cop. And that's a bit of a controversial one, depending on your community and how it all works. You guys are the experts in your community, so I'm not going to tell you that that's exactly what you need to do. But sometimes when we think through what crisis looks like for people, if they do need police and there's no trusted relationships, that can actually be incredibly traumatizing for somebody who is already going through an incredibly hard time. So Coffee with a Cop is an initiative that is happening probably in lots of different places. I did an evaluation where we heard from the services and also from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women who were experiencing domestic and family violence and connected in with the DV service, where once a week on a Wednesday morning, whatever it is, the service puts on coffee and morning tea, and there's a cop there who just comes and has a yarn, or is obviously willing and able to take referrals, but they said that that's actually never happened. It usually happens that they just come, they have a coffee, it's all really warm, friendly, nothing formal, and it helps to break down the stigma of what it might look like if you call police. It also gives people, if you rotate the police through, maybe this is what we should be talking to Queensland Police about, or National Police Services about. If you rotate people through, there's a couple of different safe faces, so that community have got a trusted person that they feel like they can call, it that they can go to. There's lots of DV liaisons in police now across the different jurisdictions. So it's just another idea and another way of trying to break down as many barriers as we can without asking people to disclose their experiences or to disclose their stories. There's youth videos on positive relationships is a really incredible one. There's lots on YouTube who have been done usually by a mob in community, and they are just the most wholesome things that you could ever watch, and so effective because you have young people communicating the importance of healthy relationships to other young people. Run monthly barbecues. If you feed people, they will usually come because it's not a scary or a formal environment. And again, it's another way of creating a level of trust, of having trusted faces around in a space where they're not being asked to disclose what is happening. So yarning circles are great. I just feel like there needs to be more informal contact with community. And murals, community walls, community projects, they are such a beautiful way for community to be able to come together and to really help break down any of the barriers. So every one of us has a role to play in creating communities where people feel safe and respected and supported. And we actually don't need people's stories to start conversations. That's my key message here. We don't need disclosure to talk about prevention and healthy relationships. What we need are culturally safe spaces, good systems that are in place that are embedded in cultural safety. That could be a whole yarn on its own. So hopefully somebody is talking about that. But I'm really happy to talk to you about it. If you want to give me a buzz at any time, actually anybody watching this, I'm very happy to take a call. And respectful relationships and clear pathways to support. So we need to embed culturally safe practices in all of those areas, but we don't have time to go through everything that might look like in half an hour. So I just want to help to create a different conversation, because that's how we help create stronger families and stronger communities and stronger futures. So we've got one last slide here that's just got questions and reflections, and I didn't put my contact details on there, but I'm happy for Dean to pass them on. And we're just about out of time. So I'm just putting it out there to say that if you do have questions or if you do have reflections after you watch this, I'm really happy, Dean, if people want to get in touch with you, I'm happy for you to pass on my number, or you can actually just find me online. It's www.marlaconsulting.com.au. Marla is Maarla. So happy to happy to yarn at any time for whatever people need.
And yeah, appreciate that. It's really invaluable, and appreciate your time to have a quick chat about everything. No questions for me. That's how I found you online. I'm sure you've got heaps of content out there, but yeah, found you online and got in contact. But yeah, thank you, Sammy, for talking about cultural safety. It's and no questions for me. But do you feel like something you weren't able to talk about during this quick yarn that may be important to people to know about? Is there anything that you're doing that's coming up in the future?
I think one of the most important things that we need to do is something like a cultural safety audit in organisations. I think we really need to get clear on what culturally safe service delivery looks like. And obviously we can't cover that in half an hour. But it really needs to be embedded in such an integral way as business as usual, not just for mob, working with mob, but for mainstream organisations as well. You really need to get clear, get relationships with community. That is the starting point for everything. Relationships are the work. You can't do anything without them. And do a cultural safety audit. There's free resources from places like the Lowitja Institute online where you can do a cultural safety audit. There's lots of free stuff. You don't have to pay for this stuff, right? You just have to make time to think about it and think it through. So have culturally safe service delivery, do a cultural safety audit, do one for free. And yeah, again, I'm just happy to chat to anybody about any questions I've got. I'm always open for a yarn.
Yeah, appreciate that. And thanks again. And if anybody needs confidential support, obviously you have 1800 Respect. It's also, 13 Yarn, Lifeline, and you may even have like local Aboriginal controlled or culturally safe services, which may be appropriate. Like Sammy said, I think, all organized, or most of them need like a cultural safety audit. So, but yeah, there's a lot of services out there that might be able to help. So thanks again, Sammy, and keep in contact.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.